Welcome to everybody. We are online. Welcome Isona, my dear colleague Isona. Welcome to the World Cinema Fund Day 2022, hybrid and online. My name is Vincenzo Bugno. I'm the head of the Berlinale World Cinema Fund. I'm here in this beautiful theater, Hau-1 in German. There is also another name, Hebel Theater, which is the home during the festival, usually, of Berlinale Talents. I would like to introduce to you also my colleague Isona.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, maybe good night for some of the viewers. We are very glad to greet you to this yearly World Cinema Fund Day in Berlin. Hopefully next year will be live.
And first of all, thank you very much to the Berlinale Talents. Without Berlinale Talents, we couldn't be here. And also thank you very much to the Goethe-Institut for its support. And I would like to say also thank you to all our partners, particularly starting with the German Federal Foundation for Culture, so-called Kulturstiftung des Bundes in German. We started the World Cinema Fund adventure already 18 years ago, 2004, with the support of the Kulturstiftung des Bundes. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for existing together and being World Cinema Fund together. But Isona, we have also other partners.
Exactly, because we have other activities during the year, the World Cinema Fund yearly activities, which are the support of production, post-production of distribution of films from the World Cinema Fund focus region, couldn't be possible with the support of the Federal Foreign Office for the World Cinema Fund Africa program, for Creative Europe Media program of the European Union for the World Cinema Fund Europe program, and the ACP Culture program financed by the European Union and by the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States.
So let's focus now on the program of the day. Maybe we should start with the title. Further developing decolonized strategies for film culture and film industry, rethinking funding strategies for the past, present and future of cinema in the World Cinema Fund regions and countries. So Isona, what about the menu of the day?
We have, for starters, talk with the director and the producers of the film from of the Nigerian South Africa production No U-Turn, which just premiered in the panorama section. After that, we will have a hybrid talk about decolonizing cinema strategies focused on South-to-South co-productions. Our main dinner, we will have decolonizing distribution, also following the path of decolonizing cinema strategies. And for desserts, we will have two talks with directors of recently World Cinema Fund supported projects from Argentina and from Kenya, which have in common also dealing with decolonization in their own countries and regions.
I would say we don't have a main course. There isn't a hierarchy between different blocks.
We have a buffet, open buffet.
Thank you very much. We can start with a short introduction. The Berlinale World Cinema Fund is about supporting film projects from some regions of the world outside Hollywood and Europe. Projects with a strong artistic profile and a strong cultural political identity. But it's also about trying to support a sort of democratization of the international film industry. But we're increasingly aware that if we talk about democratization, we should also talk about decolonization, considering that the biggest part of the World Cinema Fund regions and countries are former colonies. We should talk also about post-colonial structures which are still affecting the present of many countries, about the social and political structure of these countries. Decolonization means also decolonizing history. No doubt about it, it should be also about decolonizing cinema. Let's talk about developing strategies for the decolonization of cinema. Our program started today with a conversation on No U-Turn, a film from Nigeria, an African co-production. The film has been supported by the World Cinema Fund in the framework of World Cinema Fund Africa, but also in the framework of the complementary program World Cinema Fund ACP, meaning World Cinema Fund Africa, Caribbean, Pacific. So I would like to introduce to you first the producer of the film, Don Atkins, producer and father, I would say, of an initiative called Generation Africa. We have also online Tiny Mungwe. She's coming. Oh, thank you very much. Welcome to Berlin. Dawn is here with a real body, but also Tiny, she exists. She's not an avatar. So thank you very much for being here together. And we are waiting for the director of the film, Ike Nnabue. I hope she's joining us very soon, because obviously it would be a big pleasure to talk about this film also with the director. So, Don, I join you here. And maybe because starting talking about the film, which is a documentary, I would like to ask you to introduce, together with Tiny, the project Generation Africa.
Sure. Thank you, Vincenzo. And very glad to be here, part of the World Cinema Fund Day, and to be joined by Tiny. Tiny and I are also producers on this film, but there is Ike Nnabue from Nigeria and Christine Huilad Khan from France. So it's really an international co-production, but a co-production across Africa. And Generation Africa, we started as a project to help develop the infrastructure and the industry in Africa, particularly around documentary film, by creating a project which has now 25 documentary films from 16 countries, all African directors telling African stories, with a focus on youth opportunities, but through the lens of migration. And we felt this was very important following the so-called migration crisis in Europe in 2015. And I remember during the opening ceremony of the Berlinale in 2015, and again repeated in 2016, how the importance of cinema to tell the backstories of people who were migrating, and that they were looking for such films. And so we are very happy, excited, and proud that we have 2 of the Generation Africa films that premiered here now at this Berlinale in the panorama section.
Thank you very much, Don. Then I have another question, which is for us definitely crucial if we talk about the topic of the day and about one of the most important topics of the World Cinema Fund in these days. So the question is for you both. Would you say that Generation Africa is a kind of step towards the decolonization of cinema?
Tiny, you want to jump in there?
Sure. We've, over the course of the project, had numerous workshops where we've brought together all of the directors and all of the producers of the project. So one of the last ones, which was possible to have in person, was in Accra, where it was our pre-production workshop where all of the directors came together in order to interact with professional supporters like experts in documentary over the course of a week. And I think it was also like a very important community building event that is kind of inbuilt into the project. And one of the anecdotes that I want to share from that event is towards the end of the workshop, we had one session in which we wanted to discuss decolonization, and we framed it around a quote from The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, which is that I'm paraphrasing, but everyone knows this quote. It's about the fact that the imperative for every generation is to figure out what their mission is and then betray that mission or fulfill it. And we wanted to discuss with directors in the project what that means for them as filmmakers. And so we were very preoccupied with this conversation. And what we didn't notice is that one of the directors from Francophone Cameroon was not in the room when this conversation was being had. And so another director from the collection, from the project, also a Cameroonian, went up to look for him. But what's interesting about this director is that he's from the Anglophone part of Cameroon. His short film is actually about the Anglophone crisis in Cameroon. And these two directors, although they live in the same country, had not had an opportunity to know each other, know each other's work, but also to work together. And this was the first time that they were able to interact with each other. Many of the directors coming from French-speaking countries were basically testifying to the fact that they had never traveled to an English-speaking country, even though in West Africa, these countries are right near each other. If you think of Ghana and Benin or Togo and so on. So what this project really tries to do is to overcome the barriers that exist within this continent of 54 countries that have been colonized by maybe 6 world powers or imperial powers, in order to think about how can we not only make films together, but also how can we make films with each other's audiences in mind. What are the conversations that need to happen around and using documentary film in order to achieve this? So I think that a kind of a decolonial outlook to making films here in the 21st century is also about imagining what the future looks like on the continent and in other colonized spaces. And very much, this is the intention of Generation Africa, but also organically what comes as the outcome of working together across these post-colonial borders that exist in the making of films and trade in general in Africa.
Thank you very much, Tiny. Maybe you have something to add?
Yeah, I would add that also for us it's about having an African voice in cinema and giving the agency to African directors to make films that they want to make, and then being able to support them from within Africa. And also that our primary audience is the African audience. And I think through that and through this straddling of the colonial divide of Anglophone, Francophone Africa are ways that we are trying to decolonize cinema in Africa through this project.
Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, we have another guest, and I'm very happy to introduce to you the director of the film. Welcome, Ike Nnabue. Welcome to Berlin. Welcome to our session.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And it's perfect because I would like to start now with some questions for you. But before we start with the questions, I would like to show a first clip of the film.
We could chop mango, we could chop the meat, and we could chop anything now.
Are you freestyling with me?
Everything day, all night day high.
Young Blue,
So West African stunner, this is Gucci Wave though. So sometimes back my life is good, but now it's back fucked. So pain and sorrow is with me, so what is happening with me? It seems like enemies are after me, please Lord forgive me. Lord you say you help me, please Lord come around with me. So sometimes back I'm on the dragon steep, niggas want for being me. West African Gucci, niggas are repping Sierra Leone to the island. Yeah, so West African worldwide, I repping up the whole side. Anywhere I boss niggas the more shine. I get this game to my whole wide. Yeah, traveling up from Nigeria now I'm in Mali. Niggas are ripping up this game, niggas still want for seeing me. Repping up the BC, niggas still want for being me. I'm the real shit, West African Bondada. I smoke weed just like my grandfather. Niggas still want for hearing me.
So thank you very much. First of all, the list of the clips we're going to show is not chronological.
Okay.
Second, so the premiere of the film was yesterday, if I remember well, and it was very successful.
It was on Monday.
It was on Monday, so well, at the beginning of the week. And the first question for you is, obviously, immigration, it has to do with economical pressure, with financial problems. But if you watch the film, if you watch the clips, it's very interesting. Maybe it has also to do with your biography, because the film is very extremely personal. It's about your own biography too. I would say that observing these guys and girls, that it's also about a kind of a coming out of age story. Do you agree?
Yes, I definitely agree. So it started from my own coming of age story, and then obviously meeting all of these amazing characters. I could literally see myself in them, and it's quite interesting because if you notice, most of the characters, are young, around the age that I was when I made the first journey. So it kind of helped to reinforce in my head the fact that truly it was a coming of age story for me. I talked about the initiation into adulthood for an Igbo young man, and that's basically what that first journey was for me. It was just like that initiation, like going from a boy to a man. And that's literally what I see in most of the amazing people that I spoke with on the road.
It was the border between Mali and Burkina?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If you notice, they were saying that suya from Mali, and it's a kind of meat in West Africa, and it's just interesting.
And if we talk about the story of the film, but even more, if we talk about your personal story and biography, I would say that the Promised Land was not Europe, but instead of this, that the Promised Land is Africa.
Yes. So when I started to make the film, I set out thinking that I was going to talk to people who wanted to go to Europe, and even when I set out in my first journey, I thought I wanted to go to Europe, but after I finished making the film, I realized that the journey wasn't really about going to Europe, the place. It's about a mental place in everybody's head, really. Again, I was very young. I was 20, and most of them are very young. So it's within that age where you're still trying to find a place under the sun, just trying to sort of find your own place. And it's unfortunate that in West Africa, for instance, when you're at that age, you get to hear information, that, oh, there's a place called Europe, and, it's like a dreamland where you can find this place that you're looking for. And so mentally you're now locked onto that, and you want to get there. But at the end of the day, you realize that most times when people are on this trip, and I met a lot of people who maybe they leave Lagos or they leave Accra, and they say they're going to Europe, and they get to, say, Burkina Faso, for instance, and they find something, and they stop, and they settle, and they build their life. So that literally tells you that it's not really about Europe. It's just that people are looking for a place, and if they feel like there's no space for them in their home country, then they feel like the hope, and they hear that there's Europe, and it's like you have to cross the border, and so we keep crossing borders, hoping to find that place. And if we cross one border and we don't find that place, we'll cross the next border, but if we find the place, we'll stay there. I literally asked somebody in Burkina Faso, I think, who has settled, and he now has a business and all that, and I said, but would you like to go on this journey again? Would you like to? And he clearly told me no. He said no. He said, no doubt it would be nice to go to Europe, but he wouldn't risk his life. He would prefer to put his money together, go through the normal process, get a visa, and then fly to Europe. So at the end of the day, it's more of a mental journey. It's a more of identity crisis type journey.
Thank you. We can start with the second clip. Thank you very much.
How much? Small? Which meat is that? Meat Fran. What type of meat? Is it cow? Is it goat? Test. Me France. Two.
I believe there are so many aspects in this clip. We could discuss, maybe not for hours, but there's a lot of material. So first of all, I think it's it's also very funny. First of all, it's very interesting in order to understand colonial and post-colonial definitions, because usually people talk about Francophone Africa and English-speaking Africa, Anglophone Africa. And so it was the big problem for you in order to find a decent dinner. It's also very interesting for foreign people, I think, to get a feeling for the African reality, particularly in this country. But I would like to insist asking again a question related to your biography, because one day you arrived in Gambia and you started making films. So, meaning the promised land was also about learning and doing films. Is it true?
Yes. Again, like I said, it's about trying to find a dream. It's about trying to find what you want to do with your life. And for me, I found that dream in Gambia. You know, it happened by accident, actually. I escorted someone to a rehearsal where they were trying to make a series, a soap opera. And I got auditioned on the spot, and I got a part that ended up becoming a major part in the series. And that was my first time of being in a professional environment, you know, for filmmaking, if you like. And because it's something that I'd kind of been familiar with from childhood, where I would do like plays in elementary school, you know, in the community. I was like a little band leader, singer, you know, so it's the creative aspect of life has kind of been pulling on me, you know, from a very early childhood. And so when I had that opportunity, I thought, of course, I was in the drama department in church, and I was in the choir, you know, so it was just something that was a natural flow for me. It wasn't something I thought too much about. But what was important in Gambia for me was I realized that this is something I would like to do for my, you know, for life. And I liked how it made me feel, you know, being in that environment and, you know, being part of the creative process. And so when we finished that under like 8 months, and this, I would have been like in Gambia for about a year plus before we started. So altogether, I spent 2 years in Gambia. And when the soap opera was rested, I decided that it was time for me to go back to Nigeria, because Gambia was like, it's a very small country compared to Nigeria, and the industry was literally non-existent.
Gambia is a tongue.
Stuck in between Senegal, like two sides. And so I decided to go back to Nigeria, of course, a bigger market. You know, there's a school, there's a film school. I researched, I found a film school in a place called Jos. And I decided to go back to Nigeria to go to film school to basically study this thing and do it professionally. But the interesting thing was I couldn't get into the film school for obvious reasons. I didn't have money. I didn't have qualification to get into the film school.
Okay.
But I found a lecturer in the film school who had a studio, and because I was already familiar with the idea of apprenticeship, so I spoke to them about becoming an apprentice in the studio so that I could learn, and it worked out really quite well.
Okay, we can start with the third clip, which is, I think, extremely important in order to understand the real soul of the film.
Women confronted with scarcity in their communities make the tough decision to cross borders. Their small earnings from manual work feed families back home, often lifting them out of poverty. These women traveling through these perilous roads keep hope as their constant companion. That hope, like the moon, sometimes full in its abundance and often waning to a mere nothing. When I was 6 years old, returning from my grandmother's house, I contemplated the moon for the first time. She looked so beautiful in the twilight. It was one of those evenings when the moon comes out early to dance with the sun. Wait a minute, I thought. Was the moon following me? I wondered. I started running, and the moon started running with me. Right there and then, I knew I had found a new friend. And as I grew older, hope became an ever-constant companion too, guiding me through the path of life.
I think I would like to talk about your personal emotions. If you talk about your trip to the Promised Land 20 years ago, or maybe more, because if I would describe the most important element of this film, I think there is a strong poetic attitude, and is somehow about a very melancholic attitude. Maybe it's not a film, maybe it's about you. Do you agree?
Yes, I definitely agree. So I I like to think that I'm a poet, even though I hadn't really published anything yet. So even in my fiction films, I try to make it a bit poetic. I love poems. I love poetic films, and this film presented a perfect opportunity to express that type of expression, because it's a very melancholic film, like you rightly said. Half of the time when we were on the journey, it was just quite heavily emotional for me, because I just kept casting my mind back to the first time I made the journey and how it was for me, and then how far I've come from that. And it's always made me very emotional. So it's not surprising that people can feel that emotion when they watch the film. I'm actually very happy that we are able to transcend that emotion into the film, so that because at the end of the day, it's a story that we're telling, and it's like welcoming people into my life and just sharing, basically. And I'm very happy that then a lot of the press people also yesterday kept talking about the emotional part of it, and how they're easily kind of sucked into the film, and that's exactly what we wanted to do, and we're very excited that we achieved that.
Maybe now I have a last question, a question for everybody. I had the chance, I think it was great when I watched the film, because you can meet so many interesting and great people in all these African countries. And what I could understand, and probably the audience can understand, that is, this film is also about the impossibility to go back home, because there is always, I don't know, a kind of, they cannot deal with this, because maybe coming back home would mean being unsuccessful or something like that. So do you think it's about it? This film is about immigration, but about also staying in the place where you have found a place to stay. It was definitely not Europe.
Yeah, that part is a very important part, and is a very big part of the problem that is associated with migration, especially in Africa, especially in West Africa, where I'm from. Nobody wants to be seen as a failure, especially not after you've kind of made a move. You don't want to just come back as a failure, empty-handed. There's a stigmatization that comes with that. And so those are the things that make people desperate, and they would rather be languishing somewhere in the desert hoping that they would make a success out of the journey, instead of going back home. For me, it was very clear to me that I couldn't just turn around and go home. That's why I went to Gambia. You know, I could have, at the time, the thing that we were told in Bamako that it was very dangerous to continue. And I realized that, yes, it was dangerous and I wasn't going to risk my life like that. I still had enough money to take me safely back to Lagos, but it wasn't even an option. I just knew that I just couldn't go back to Lagos because everybody already, in fact, with news already started circulating that, oh, we had gone to Europe. And in Lagos or in West Africa, once people hear that you've relocated to Europe or you've gone to Europe, the next thing everybody is expecting is for you to come back rich. You know? So, and we know it, everybody knows it. It's like an unspoken law, you know? So, nobody wants to go back empty-handed. It takes a certain level of courage to be able to say, you know what, I failed, I'm going back to drawing board, you know. I was able to go back after 2 years, not because I found money, but I found a dream. And that dream meant so much to me that I didn't care what people were going to say. You know, in fact, when I went back to Lagos and I went to my village to see my mother, just to see her, because for 2 years she hadn't seen her son. At some point she thought maybe I died or something because I couldn't communicate. It's not like today where you have cell phones and all of that, you know. So I needed to just see her. And I remember that after I saw her, then I needed to proceed to Jos. I didn't have enough money to pay for my transportation. She still went into her little savings and scratched around, and you know, my sister contributed from her school pocket money, and I was able to buy my ticket to Jos. You know, so it was that bad. But because I had a dream that now was driving me more than any other thing, I was able to withstand the stigmatization. And yes, there was stigmatization. Even in my village, people were talking, like, you know, like, it's gone out and wasted his life for 2 years, you know, it's like, you know.
Thank you. Time is running. I have a last question, which is crucial, I think, particularly if we consider the topics of the date. The question is more for Don and Tani. So what about the further life of this film after the invitation in Berlin? What about the visibility of this film? What about distribution ideas? What about contextualizing this film in different regions and cultural contexts? So what kind of ideas do you have in mind?
I'll kick off a little bit and let Tiny take the last bit of it. I think just to say that our aim with this project was to shift the narrative on migration. And I think when you see what's coming out of this film, when you see what's coming out of the other film in Panorama, No Simple Way Home, is hope and dreams. And that's because it's an African voice coming through. And I think these films will find, they'll resonate with audiences across the continent because people will relate to this hope and these dreams, because that is what drives so many people. But of course, we want them to reach a global audience, and we have Arte as our lead broadcasters, so they'll be shown in Europe with participating broadcasters, Arte in different other countries. And then we will also be taking them into communities and showing them there in order to stimulate dialogues. Tiny, add to that, please.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the question of audience design is one that's multiple pronged. We're very grateful to have been able to reach like a wide international kind of footprint with the festival window that we've had in the film. We think that it's important that the films are central in driving the debate around immigration, not just for Africa and the African diaspora, but I think for the world in general. So we begin our our impact producing component of the project in a few weeks, where we're going to be developing a toolkit that looks at impact producing specifically in the African region, where we'll be bringing in experts from different regions in Africa, but also the global South generally, looking at shared experiences around impact producing and creating impact for documentaries, but also helping and supporting our partners in the 16 countries who are co-producers for these films to develop a specific impact strategy for each of these films in order to make sure that they, one, reach audiences widely, but also they are able to make a change in the societies where these films are meant to be going to. Broadcast will also be happening concurrently, like Don said, from the end of May onwards. And we're really hoping that these films will have a long life, both in the kind of traditional platforms that are available for documentaries on this continent and outside of this continent, but also, more importantly, as a kind of as a tool for intervention for discussions around immigration and the other issues that are there in the films during the impact strategy phase of the project, which is coming up.
Thank you very much, Tiny. Thank you very much, Don. So we are proud that we got the opportunity of supporting this film. And obviously, Ike, so we are already waiting for your collection of poems.
Yes, NFT poems coming through.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Vincenzo.
Thank you so much.
And now I would like to...
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Tiny.
So now I would like to invite on stage my colleague Izona Metla with the moderator of the next session, Marjorie Bendek. So Izona, you are on stage.
Hello. And in very good company indeed. And let's get started. No. Okay, hello again. I'm back, and this time in very good company. Let me kindly introduce the panel South to South. Although German and European producers play a very significant role in the funding structure of the World Cinema Fund, one of our slogans is and has been for many years, further exploring new geographies of co-production. And that is a bit what we are going to talk about. We strongly believe in cooperations. We strongly believe in innovations. And in that sense, we think that also thinking on decolonizing strategies, encouraging cooperations in the framework of the South to South, in the framework of the World Cinema Fund regions, it has to be crucial to keep on this path on decolonizing the cinema structures. And that's why we invited today, as a moderator, Marjorie Bendek. She is an ally of the World Cinema Fund. She's been in the World Cinema Fund since the minute #1 of its birth, and she's also a very cherished friend. So this is also a love letter to her. And let me, a couple of words about her. She's from Honduras, lived in Mexico, studied in Cuba, moved to Berlin, and she is the head of the Connecting Cottbus, a film market in Cottbus focused on Eastern Europe. So no one better to moderate the discussion. Thank you, Marjorie, and welcome to the World Cinema Fund Day.
Thank you, Isona. Thanks for that love letter. I'm very flattered. And so hi, everyone. Welcome. First of all, I would like to say how happy I am to be here and to be able to moderate this panel, because this is a very important subject, and this is a crucial issue that also is in the head of the readers of the World Cinema Fund, which I'm part of from almost 20 years, I have to say, right? Is it almost 20 years? Maybe more? I don't know. It feels like a lifetime. But in any case, I also want to say that we miss you, and we would love to have the wonderful connections that are created at the World Cinema Fund Day over the last years, like this coming together from very unconventional regions, which is also a good birthplace for unconventional collaborations and co-production. So, but this is what we have nowadays, so this online format. It's a bit strange to be on this stage once again, but I would like to invite two of our panelists who are here physically with us today, and this is Isabel Arrate and Elian Ferreira, please. And on the screen, we are going to have Julia Bahara and Elias Ribeiro, who should be coming over there in a bit. And we are going to talk about South-to-South co-productions, decolonizing cinema strategies. Welcome on the stage. Hi. Yeah, this is, no, I come here. Yeah, because I got to see the screen somehow. Okay, is there a break? I don't know what's going on. We are waiting for the others to show up on the screen. Yes? Okay, well, while we're waiting for the others, maybe I will say a little bit of about you guys, that it was talking about this being online for such a long time. You guys are meeting for the first time in person today, a few minutes ago. So maybe, Isabel, you would like to say a few words about yourself?
Yes, well, I'm Isabel Arate Fernandez. I run the ITFA Bertha Fund, which is a fund similar to the World Cinema Fund, but that only supports documentary film in the same regions as the World Cinema Fund. We are part of the ITFA, the International Documentary Film Festival in Amsterdam. And one of the things we do is also organize, as ITFA, organize workshops where we gather projects from all around the world. And that's how the journey with Eliane started. So it's great to see her physically today and catch up after all the catching up on Zoom.
Yeah, Eliane?
Hi, I am Eliane Ferreira. I'm a producer from Brazil, now living between Brazil and Portugal. Yeah, it's really interesting, this opportunity that we have to meet personally, because we met in, I think it was in 2021, when I was with a Brazilian project at ITFA Summer Space. And was online for the first time because of the pandemic, and then I was there with a Brazilian project that was supported by ITFA in the developing, and I met Zipi and Mina that were there with Testament, the project from Kenya, and was because of this that we met, and we have this we felt that we can work together, and it was really nice. And since then, I met Isabel other times, of course, online, because we did the pitch in ITFA for Testament in 2020. Then 2021, we did the pitch for my other Brazilian project regarding memory and neglect. And this is the first time that we are in person, and was really nice, this opportunity to be here. And I'm really happy to be here because World Cinema Fund is another fund that I really love it, as IDFA that did not only the support, the grant support, but is really interested about the projects. So about the developing of the project, and I think this is really important for us.
Yeah, this is one of the goals as well, to follow up, to be there, and yeah, we're going to get to talk about that in a bit. I'd like to welcome Julia, who is on the screen. So hi, Julia, maybe you could say a bit short intro of yourself in Indonesia, right? Oh.
Yes, good evening. Hello, Marjorie. Hello, Isabel and Elias. It's an honor for me to join in this very important topic. I'm Julia Ike Nnabue. I'm producer from Indonesia. My company, Kawan-Kawan Media, is the company that based in Jakarta, and we are focused on the international co-production. And I think our relationship with World Cinema Fund, that the World Cinema Fund been help our project a lot. And looking forward to talk to you.
Great, welcome, Julia. And do we have Elias as well? No? Okay, he's not here yet. Maybe he will join in a bit. This is one of the typical glitches also. It's an all-female panel, wonderful. So let's get started. The idea is we started talking about decolonizing cinema last year at the World Cinema Fund Day, and this has created a very nice theoretical approach to the matter, and all these videos, all these recordings can be found on internet, which is amazing also because it's become like a reference for many people. But it would be interesting this year, which is the reason for this panel, to have some practitioners talking about concrete experiences that you've had, and maybe we could start talking about independence, because decolonization and independence are two words that just come together. In German, it's a word Selbstständigkeit, and it's really the possibility to stand by yourself. And this is something that's very important. It's about, it's something that is acquired only by the person itself, not something that you can teach somebody. So this is not like the idea that somebody can help somebody to be independent. This is already a bit protectionistic in that sense. So decolonization and all of this has to be a process that comes from within the regions. And maybe, Isabel, because you're also representing a fund, how do you think, how do you see the role of funds like World Cinema Fund or IDFA Berta in supporting this kind of South-to-South co-productions?
Well, I think what we're seeing now is that it's, and Eliane and her collaboration with these projects is a very good example of that, of how important it is exactly for what you're saying to strengthening that sense of independence, because talking about co-production and independence is a contradiction in itself already. And particularly when we're talking about co-production, what I think we know most of now from north to south, south to north, where it's very difficult to be independent because of the financial aspect and financial relationship and all that. And what I find interesting about this South-to-South collaborations is that maybe the starting point is not necessarily financing, because what we're talking about is a collaboration between countries where, if you look at the role that the IDFA Berta Fund has, that the World Cinema Fund has, in many of these countries, in the end, we're filling in a gap for the lack of national support, like we know in Europe, the national bodies that support independent cinema, that have systems in place for this to be transparent and independent. In many of these countries, these bodies do not exist, and we fill in that gap. And there are not many funds to support international co-production as a Brazilian producer or as a Kenyan producer or as a producer in one of these countries. So if these collaborations start from a different, use a different starting point, which is not financing and accessing co-production funding, but the starting point is creative collaboration, a connection, the strengthening you get from that for the projects, for the collaborations, for the feeling of independence, and also feeling supported in a very competitive industry by getting the right partners that can help you strengthen to really bring out your vision and make the film you want to make, not only led by commercial or funding interests. So I'm not sure this answers your question of what we are doing with regards to this. I think in our role, obviously, because of what we're trying to do is strengthen the position of filmmakers, teams, so directors and producers in the regions we work in, financially and through an exchange of knowledge. In the sense of, the Testament is, for example, a very good, is a good example of a project that we were involved in a very early phase, 2 first-time filmmakers producing and directing at the same time, international interest, but for them also struggling to find a way to navigate this and all the interest from European co-producers. And the moment that Eliane got in, that really meant also a support, like coming from the same side as where they were standing in. And we had a lot of conversations at the beginning where they involved me with regards to how to set up this co-production. And we were able to get a producer to consult them, to really look at how are we going to structure this co-production in a way that everybody's happy with it and that it works for everybody. So in that sense, that's how we are approaching this. But I think it starts also by strengthening the position financially, but particularly also through knowledge and contact of the producers and directors in the regions where we work at.
Yeah, something I hear very often from applicants to these funds when they receive such a fund, that their national systems and institutions gain a lot of respect for them because of this international recognition. So this is like just, in a way, a seal of approval to help them understand that there is a community out there which understands their artistic position as well. So this is totally true. So yes, it actually does answer the question, so thanks very much. And Elias, thanks for joining us. I'm just acknowledging your presence here for now, but I'm going to ask you a few questions later on, so thanks for being here. And just because we started talking about Testament already, Eliana, maybe you would like to share a bit of the experience, like the hands-on experience about the collaboration.
Yeah, as I said, we met in this event of IDFA. Zippy and Mina are directors, first-time directors and producers. I felt that the film have a real important subject that we need to talk about. I always say that we are talking about Black Lives Matters and everything, but we have to take, like, I don't know, 10 steps back and go to Africa first. And for me, it was something like really interesting, because I was in a moment in Brazil that, because of the government that we have there, it doesn't have finance anymore. So, of course, as a producer that have experience, I was understanding that how could I collaborate in a financial way with them. But what happens in the end was exactly what Isabel said. We start to talk, and I understand so easy all the issues of the project, of the subject that they are talking about, because of course I came from a colonized country. So in the end, they said to me, no, we wanted you to join us. And I was so happy and said, why me? And they said, because you were the first producer. We met a lot of producers from Europe, from United States, from different kinds of that could help us more with the financial part, maybe, but you are the first that really understand completely our subject. So is this, I think, this production South by South, what is the first thing that makes us match, I think, is this creative part. Because we understand about the colonialism. We understand about the situation. And it's easier for me, of course, it's completely different what happened in Kenya and what happened with Brazil. But in a way, have some points that are the same, so it's easier for me understand that, and of course when we are now going to start to edit in the film, we still have but we still have things to shoot, but we are starting to edit the film. I propose them to have a Brazilian editor, Jordana Berg, who is really experienced, and I think because I thought the same. She will have the same collaboration, artistic collaboration that I could bring for you, the creative collaboration. So we are on that. We are accessing funds as World Cinema Fund. We are accessing funds that we doesn't need to be from Brazil or for Kenya, but we have this opportunity to access this kind of funds. And of course, we still have a gap, but we are close that we never were before. And is even with the pandemic, even that we met online, we are doing the film. And this is amazing.
That's great. And how is it the structure? How is the structure? Is it just Brazil, Kenya, or what are the other?
No, the structure is the both directors, Mina and Zippy, are from Kenya. Zippy still lives in Kenya. Mina now lives in the United States. So the structure is Kenya, United States, Brazil, Portugal, because I have the possibility of the two companies. And now with World Cinema Fund, we have a co-production here with Authentica Films, a Germany company. So it's this, and we have many different funds from everywhere. We have hot dogs, we have IDA, we have Berta, we have now World Cinema Fund, we have Ford Foundation, Chicken and Eggs, and it's crazy. And of course, as Mina and Zippy are female directors, we open another layer of possibilities of projects, of finance, sorry. So is this, we are fighting for those funds, of course. It is a fighting because have a lot of amazing projects that have the same situation or worse situation than our project have, and is this. But we have this opportunity of these funds and not depend only for funds from Kenya or for Brazil and it's working.
Yeah, no, great. I mean, like you said, you have to kind of try to structure. Like co-production is not just about, hi, nice, we like each other, let's collaborate, but it has a lot of paperwork, a lot of, like trying to find the right ways of representing these funds and combining them with each other. And then you have to get creative, like finding which kind of funds can match.
And what Isabella did for us in the moment that we are starting to set up this co-production that have have a producer helping Mina and Zippy, because for me it was easy to make this because I have the experience, but for them was not. And for me it was really important that they feel comfortable about our deal. And this is something that is important too. It's not about only money or percentages, but it's about everybody are happy doing the film, because it's really hard to do this kind of film. So we need to be happy.
For sure.
And in that respect, something to consider is that the moment, in this case, Eliana got on board, there were two directors that had already invested at least 2 years, maybe even 5 years in the project. So getting a partner on board that is then going to be the experienced producer is also about discussing and finding the balance of that collaboration, and where that investment of 5 years is valued and still there.
No, for sure. And you also mentioned something interesting that might be a good bridge to get Julia involved in the conversation, not that you're just on the screens over there. But for example, that you have this collaboration with Portugal, because you have this company possibility on both countries, right?
I have the company in Portugal, so I have this collaboration, yes.
Yeah, so also it's more typical apparently to have maybe with the previous colonizer countries, so to say, and to be able to access other kinds of funds as well. But then there's also the focus on the region, because in Latin America, Brazil is kind of like an outlier because of the language and many other reasons. But, because the common language that we have in Latin America, which is Spanish, is actually the colonizer's language, who came in a very diverse region and kind of gave it some sort of uniformity. So I'm going to go to Asia, because Southeast Asia is something that is, it's a region that is also perceived as a region, but is extremely diverse as well. How do you deal with co-producing within the region, and what are your experiences with regional partners, but also with looking into Europe for partners? Julia?
Thank you, Marjorie. So yes, I think the first reason that why I did the co-production is about the financing reason, of course, because it's difficult to finance the film from our own country, and then back then 4 years later, 4 years back, I think we only co-produced with Europe country, because there were World Cinema Fund, Cinema du Monde that we can access. But now in these 4 years, we already have this regional fund that I think for us in Southeast Asian, it's very natural that we can working together, because we know each other, even though we have a barrier in language, because our language was totally different, but because we know each other, and then we deal with political situation almost the same thing. I think it's very natural. But then after the funding scheme that can give opportunity to Southeast Asian country to working together, it's even more bigger than I think. And then the second reason, then we coming with the reason that this is not only a finance scheme collaboration, but this is about how we can work together in artistic collaboration. This is not like a must because of the spending obligation, but this is a needs. We need to working together to make a better film, to make a better quality. And I think the third reason is about how we can access the wider audiences for our films. So that's I think what happened now in Southeast Asian, and then the initiative like Southeast Asian Fiction Lab, something like workshop, something like that, Locarno Open Doors, Ties That Bind. This is also bring us together, and then we can learn about producing, about how to working together. I think, yeah, this is more about collaboration now, I think. Yeah.
And when you say the audiences, because you were mentioning that collaborating within the region helps you expand your audience within the region, but then also probably for the Europe, I mean, for including Europe as well? And
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I think that's also the reason for the last project that I produced. This is a six-country co-production with Singapore, with Philippines, and then also with Germany, France, and also Poland. I think it's the same thing. Finance at the beginning, but then artistic collaboration, and then I think how we can bring this film to wider audiences, also not only in our region but also in Europe. I think, yeah.
And then to get Elias involved on the conversation as well. He's gone for now. Is he back? Or I don't see him again. Okay, there you are. So just Elias, as a producer yourself, I mean, you're a Brazilian-born, living in South Africa, producer working pretty much internationally. Maybe you can say a couple of words about your background, and then just add, would you be interested, for example, in also collaborating with a project in Southeast Asia?
Hi, Marjorie, and hi, my co-panelists. Apologies for keeping you all waiting. I was confused with the time. It's really great to be here, and I'm very jealous of you sitting in Berlin together. As a producer, it's been 12 years that I've moved to South Africa, set up Uruku Media in partnership with Kate. We've made, I believe, 8 international co-productions, the majority as majority producers, and a couple as minority producers where we did barter deals because we don't have a financing instrument for minority co-productions in South Africa. We have quite a sophisticated system with tax rebates and broadcasters, National Film Fund, regional funds, but also a very specific editorial line and with very strong Black economical empowerment policies in place. The rest of the continent, there are countries out of 52 nations. I think Senegal, Ivory Coast, Morocco, Kenya is flourishing. Obviously, Nigeria is very vibrant, but there's very few public instruments for co-production and very few intra-Africa agreements in place. There's a lot of intention for more African cooperation. Outside of my producer role, we've launched something that's called the Goethe-Institut in 2015, and this has now become an umbrella for 6 different capacity building programs that are contributing to a more dynamic ecosystem in the continent. And one of the initiatives is a partnership with the EAVI and IFFR Pro, as well as Sundance, called Creative Producer Nnabue, which is very much mirrored on Ties That Bind and Puentes, trying to forge collaboration between North America, Europe, and Africa. Because the reality is that there's a real scarcity of structure, of infrastructure, financial instruments, especially public. So we rely a lot in private initiative and our creativity in how to create the deals and realign with our international partners in a fairer way. Because if you play by the current book of rules with especially if you're working with the European Regional Fund, where you have to spend 150 to 250% of the money you raised in that region, paying local social taxes, the crazy exchange rates, the cost of labor being much higher, it gives the European producer a lot of equity in terms of that real estate for a very little artistic contribution. And it's something that we often need to talk and find common agreement so that all of us can be happy, like Eliana wisely said.
No, I think that's what it's about, really, in the co-production.
No, this is really point, and thank you, hi Elias, that you bring this to the discussion, because is this, in the end, of course, we can access other we have to really take care about other funds that came from Europe or for that, because we need to expand like 150 in this country. It's not a concrete collaboration. Sometimes creatively, it's only for have the points and everything. And in the end, have a lot of percentages. We lost a lot, no, Elias? And and for us is something that we made like, oh my God, okay. But this is more common, I think.
Yeah.
I think start to talk about South-South co-production is something that is new and could be something really incredible. I'd love to collaborate more in this way, South-South, you know, because I think we have this feeling that we can do in a different way that will be better for each country, you know. And this is something that we really have to discuss about.
Yeah, and sorry, Isabel?
No, and I was just thinking about earlier when Eliana was talking about involving Jordana Berg, the editor. I think it's also an opportunity to, in this exchange from south to south, to find people that come from a reality that is closer to you as creative collaborators. So instead of going to that consultant editor from Europe, because there's more experience, there are film schools, etc., you find somebody that is in another continent, but that where somehow there is a similarity, so that can much easier transport itself into what the story is. And the same goes, I mean, in general, what we see in documentary editors is like, there's a need for editors to really bring films to a next stage, but also something like creative producers. That's why what Elias is doing with Nnabue is great, because that's getting these creative producers on the forefront. But that's also how Eliana got involved in this other project. So I think that's very interesting in this South-South collaboration.
Yeah, and the South-South in general, I would say one of the problems or complications that it has is like the extreme diversity and the huge geographical distances between the countries. But in a way, maybe being provocative, is one of the positive things that we have had from the pandemic, that actually people get more used to this communication. Across the world through different time zones and via internet, you know, so it really is creating, maybe let's say it's easing the communication bridges in a way, you know, because people are more open to this kind of communication and to creating or even starting a collaboration without even having met in person, which used to be absolutely unconceivable, no? But like Elias, you were also talking like it's like like within your continent, and also Julia, you were talking about like your region itself. But for example, do you think or do you conceive that it makes sense to try to move out and into other regions and to kind of create new bridges? Maybe Julia, you would like to say something? Have you had an opportunity to collaborate outside your region and Europe, for example?
Not yet, but I think it's totally makes sense. And I think I agree that this pandemic teach us a lot, and then we all of the obstacles or things that we think that impossible in the past. I think now we can sort of like see that this is a possible. I think yes, in my opinion, it's totally makes sense to working on this. And then I think what we have to stress about is how to make this more on the collaboration, like artistic collaboration, rather than like competition or privilege. I think we should start to talk about creative collaboration, I think.
Yeah, and Elias, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I don't think I answered the last part of your first question. I was a mentor at Open Doors while they were focusing in Southeast Asia, and because of that, I got approached by quite a few interesting projects. And despite the fact that I would love to participate, I couldn't find an in. No? What can I really bring to the table to make this make sense? So I missed the beginning of the conversation, but I'm understanding that Beta Fund is now funding co-productions between two partners from the South. And I find that, is that correct?
No. No.
Is that the intention?
Unfortunately not. I wish, but no. We run a similar program as it is a similar program as the World Cinema Fund called It's Bertha Fund Europe, but that's for co-productions between European partners getting involved in a documentary from one of the what we call IBF regions, World Cinema Fund regions. It's the same.
Yeah, I think it's the golden question is like we need to create this fund that will support these collaborations from the global south, because we don't really have the instruments in place to tap into. And I think there's a lot of desire to collaborate. I've co-produced a film in Brazil where we offer the post-production to the film. We brought this film into South Africa for the online edit and all the way to DCP. But it was mostly banking on our relationships and a little bit of money to make the co-production happen, which was out of pocket, wasn't raised from any institution. So yeah, I think there's, and despite, you said very rightly, Marjorie, about the geographical distance and what that amounts in terms of time zones, the complications of working different times of the day, etc. But there's a proximity, like a conceptual proximity that I think comes from the colonial trauma that all of us had.
Totally.
that brings us together.
Yeah, no, this is what Liliana was saying as well. Like, it's about this back of like the shared social-political trauma or history, or however you would like to call it.
No, and even when I have the opportunity in the pandemic to go to Kenya, and for me was my first time in Africa, and for me was something that, besides, of course, is different than Brazil, and Elias can say more about that. It's different, but it's not. I came from the north of Brazil, from Belém, and when I saw Africa it's really a way to compare how is my hometown. We have a lot, and poverty. We have this, so it's nothing that makes me, oh my God, Africa. No, it's something that I see, and I see that before, and and I felt completely okay, and I felt that I belong to this place too, So I think this is, besides, of course, all of this, we have the similarity even when we are there. And you see how people live there,
Yeah, you can relate.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
And also, I also think it would be, like for example, taking the example of how Eastern Europe has developed. No, they had a very shared socio-political background for many years, which kind of like got disrupted at the same time, which is different. Like in the global South, it has been different times, different centuries, etc. But in the Eastern European industry, in the last 25 to 30 years, they have managed to create functioning systems. Of course, it might help the proximity to Europe and geographical proximity, I have the feeling, because it's also as diverse with languages, etc., and countries that are like even torn by war internally, etc. And also this is, in that case, rather similar. They've had the opportunity to grow and try to copy this system in a way. Of course, they have the advantage that some of the countries are part of the Creative Europe, etc. But also these programs created from Creative Europe, like ACP, for example.
What happens with us here. ACP was one of the possibilities that make us to have a better finance that came from World Cinema Fund.
Yeah, and it is about the finance in the end, and it's about, like Elias said, finding the right structures or developing instruments. For this, of course, it's necessary to be in contact and in collaboration. So it would be nice maybe to kind of give out the idea into the world, to start a forum, to start some discussion, some collaboration, and which is, at the World Cinema Fund Day, we have the opportunity usually to be all together. At some point, this will happen again, and to just kind of start this process from within, like from not because I have a, okay, maybe I have a problem. I wouldn't say I have a problem, but it's like when you think that these initiatives are being organized from the European side, you think like, okay, it's kind of like, can feel manipulative in a way, you know, like if it comes from within, if it comes from organizations or from regions that are trying to get this started, you know, then it gains more momentum.
If I may add something to that, I mean, what you're pointing out, I think that's one of the things that are necessary. That would be great. But I would like to add to that that what is also necessary to start South-South collaborations or co-productions and to better the North-South, South-North collaborations is to start thinking differently how one approaches what a co-production is. Because now that is very much based on the model that is known, which is from the north and which is based on funding and who is bringing in what in the finance plan and then how that is divided. And that also needs a new look at, a new ways of working and how to value contribution of co-producers in a project, not only financially.
Totally true. Maybe I'd like to throw a question into the room to see how would you define like this decolonizing process? How could you like throw an idea out there to decolonize the concept of co-production? I don't know. I see you guys thinking a bit. Elias, would you like to jump in?
I'll take a stab at it. I feel like we are in the middle of doing that since we launched Realness. It's very much been about putting the camera in the hands of the African filmmaker and now listening to the story from their perspective. And I think that's a huge step in the right direction. And then after we got to some place with the Screenwriters Residency, Nnabue came about to foster more collaboration amongst the countries in the continent. And there's a very specific criteria. We're selecting leaders, we're selecting people who are willing and have the stamina to cause impact, to help transform, to help build, because that's the space that we are operating from. There's so much scarcity and we need to unite and build bridges and cooperate creatively, financially, politically. I feel like in Africa there's a lot of work to be done at a governmental level in lobbying for better policies that support not only the making but also the distribution of content. While distribution of our films is still centered in the north, we're always going to be in trouble. Our main market is in the continent, but we don't have screens. We don't have distributors. So again, it goes back to infrastructure. There's plenty of stories and plenty of eyeballs out there. So it's about building in our market.
Thanks. And would you, maybe you or Julia would like to add something? Do you think the funding institutions, the European funding institutions, is this kind of like the nice face of post-colonialism? How would you think of that? How would you perceive these funding institutions from Europe in the process of decolonization? It's too complicated.
Look, I see them as great partners. We wouldn't be able to be making our films without their support. I feel like there's a great human beings behind those institutions that really care about cinema, that have been working proactively to change the status quo. So I'm very appreciative of those institutions. I've been very privileged to have support from most of them, and continue to grow those relationships and to shine light on different ways of thinking, asking questions when I'm given the opportunity to drive change. But I see them as allies, not as the bad people.
That's a good way to hear it, right, Isabel?
Yes, I was already thinking, oh God, I'm now representing all the European institutions. But I think, thank you, Elias, for saying that. But it's also, I mean, this is not a static thing. As an institution, you're not a static thing. Things change, surroundings change, way of thinking change. So that also brings the responsibility, with all the good intentions we all have, the responsibility of keeping an open mind and a critical mind towards your own doing with regards to selection processes, transparency. All these things are super important. They go hand in hand with the good intentions.
Totally, totally. And Julia, would you like to add something to that from your perspective? You have to unmute, sorry.
Sorry.
Hey.
So yeah, I think like a filmmaking process, from one to another, co-production also one to another. I think about funding, this is also, of course, always work in progress. And I agree with Elias that we are kind of alliance, we are friends, we need each other. So I think how it depends on how we see it. I think, yeah, we can working together. I think it's not like the European funding have to disappear. I think I don't totally agree with that.
Okay, thanks. And Eliana, would you like to add?
No, I agree, and especially is this, what Elias says, is the opportunity to give the voice for people from like this film about Kenya, of course, is much more important that the authors are from Kenya. So it's give the voice to those people and give the opportunity to do all kind of projects, all kind of subjects. Sometimes I see from Brazil that people are expecting projects only that we talk about poverty or something like that, but I think we can do all kind of stories. And is this, we can be free and we can be listened to tell all the stories that we want to tell. I think this is the most important thing, and I think most of those funds do that.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a nice note to end this, because I was just told that our time is running out. And I want to give a big thank you to you guys. And if we had a huge auditorium in front of us, we're in a beautiful theater, by the way. And it would be wonderful to have like a big applause right now. If you're at home, maybe you can just do a little clap just to make us feel better. So thank you, Julia, thank you, Elias, thank you, Isabel, and thank you, Eliane, for being here.
Thank you.
And we miss you all and hope to see you live at some point soon again. Thanks. And I don't know what's coming up now.
Bendik was the moderator of the last panel, and thank you very much to our guests from Brazil, Portugal, Indonesia, South Africa.
And Netherlands.
And the Netherlands. Yes, thank you very much. Now we are going to deal with another topic which is for us also definitely essential. If I remember well, Julia, the producer from Indonesia, started talking about being a work in progress in the previous panel, and definitely, yes, I think being a work in progress is something positive, and definitely also the World Cinema Fund is a work in progress because we have to deal with so many changement of the film culture, of the film industry. And I think also the big question is about trying to understand what is more needed if we talk about the different regions of the World Cinema Fund, the relation with the other regions, the relation with the global film industry. So we mostly support film production, but I think there is a real need, and we should even more talk, even more think about decolonizing distribution strategies and about contextualizing the visibility of the World Cinema Fund funded film in the different regions of the world. So this is the reason because we have another panel now focus on these topics, and we have great guests and a great moderator. Isona?
You have said a key word about that, which is dialogue. We, as the World Cinema Fund, we are an institution, but we really want to get in touch to the ground. We want to get in touch with the filmmakers. We want to get in touch with the key players of the industry, just to understand how to keep on moving. And this is a thing that we have been talking about. Contextualizing visibility of the films that we support, getting closer to the realities of the World Cinema Fund regions. We have been talking about this in the past years. We have been developing audience design strategies for our films. And now in the World Cinema Fund Day of this year, we have invited to this panel to keep players of the industry, wholesales, distributors, experts in audience design from Latin America, from Africa, from Asia, and to keep on receiving input about that. I don't want to spoil, so I just invite you to to listen to this conversation, and yeah, I think you won't be disappointed.
So let's introduce the name, let's introduce the guest. First of all, the moderator, Ala Karkuti, based in Cairo, is the head of the company called Med Solutions. He's a film analyst and definitely knows very well not only the cinema industry, the film industry in the Arab world. And he will be in conversation with Vijay Lai, a producer and curator from Singapore, based also in Canada. Steven Markowitz, key player of the African film industry from Cape Town, South Africa. Fiorella Moretti. Fiorella Moretti is based in France, but she's originally from Peru and
Mexico.
No, she's from Peru.
Spent
many years working in Mexico as a producer and distributor.
I learned something.
And then we have also a colleague from Berlin, Benjamin Köhler, academic and a real expert of different word sales and audience designer strategies. Before starting, just another element, which is not an element. So our guests, they are going to talk also about some very important films of the World Cinema Fund history, like Rafiki from Kenya was very successful, not only in Cannes 2 or 3 years ago. Taste, who won the jury award of the Section Encounters in Berlin last year. And then a film from Indonesia, Vengeance.
Is mine other pay cash?
Vengeance always pay cash.
Always pay cash.
I have always had problems with this title, but believe me, I'm in love with this film. And this film won by Edwin, the director.
Exactly.
Edwin,
the Golden
won
Leopard.
The Golden Leopard in Locarno in August last year. So thank you very much to our guests, and let's start this other conversation, which has been pre-produced during the last weeks. Thank you.
I think that we have been thinking that it's going to be over several times. I mean, for instance, when I was a distributor in Mexico, there is the Cinematheque of Mexico, and then the rest are multiplex with popcorn, nachos, pizzas, and you manage to exist as a distributor of art house in this kind of a space. I think each country will have a different impact, but I want to believe that it's going to continue. I also have heard in different countries of ideas. For example, I know a lot of cinemas in Spain that has been created, like small theaters that do special events in Barcelona and Madrid. And in Mexico, there is Cine Tonalá that open also in Colombia, and they do like different kind of programming. It's not a traditional release of 1 week complete, but it's something that tries to keep the theatrical alive. I think that this kind of workshops made with the audience, to work the audience like the ones that Benjamin is leading, my dream will be that this is done in a lot of territories, not only for one film, you know, like to encourage the distributors in each territory to think about their country and to think about how to explore other options to reach their audiences.
I'm starting to see some smaller or new distributors come out that are trying interesting models, or cinematheques that are trying interesting models that I wonder if in the long term, when hopefully things continue to improve, you know, like there's a cinematheque in Macau, for example, that Lorna curates for, and then there's a distribution company that was started recently in Thailand called Common Move, where they do pairings, or they do like a series of 3 films together along a loose sort of theme, and then they push it as a cinematic sort of event. So like you know, over 2 weeks or something, there's these 3 films, and then they customize the release around these 3 films for this select sort of period, and maybe that's the strategy moving forward for certain types of films, that you won't have the traditional sort of, you know, theatrical release with your you know, reviews and the publicity and your sponsors, but it will be this kind of more intimate sort of direct sort of relationship with that sort of dedicated audience.
I mean, in the 50s, when television was coming, everybody said, "Oh, cinema will die," and we see it didn't, which is the good news. However, I mean, as I said, I think it really depends on how we make the young audiences, how we convince the young audiences to believe in the cinema as a space as we do, that adds to the experience of watching a film and is another experience of watching a film. And I believe the more we are able to communicate that and to make this experience for younger audiences, the more the cinema will survive in the future.
And do you think now with with the speed of the platforms recently, of course they're getting more art house, etc., and this can create easily by time kind of a fake market in a way, or fake industry for specific films, because it's related for now. Do you think this have a strong effect, can confuse you sometimes, or it doesn't matter at all?
No, I mean, that's the optimistic side for me. Is I think now, Netflix is spending a lot of money in Africa, and I think Amazon and Disney Plus are coming, and other platforms also. So I think there is more of a kind of industry developing around that. My concern is a couple of concerns. The one is around the potential homogenization of cinema through the platforms, the kinds of films that are curated. I think there's a question mark there for me. And the other is, which is more of a reality in Africa, is that, internet speeds are still pretty slow. I mean, Netflix, for instance, have started offering their services in Kenya for free to be able to pick up more subscribers, and hopefully eventually they'll start paying. So there still is a very low penetration of platforms on this continent. And for us, it's obviously a priority. Our first priority is to make films for our home audience. And, cinemas are very limited here. And still the speed of internet holds back the development of larger audiences. So I think that's the big challenge, is a huge infrastructure challenge, which also becomes a freedom of expression issue and many other things, not having access to fast internet.
I am optimistic about some parts of the world in terms of theaters, but I'm not optimistic at all in many parts, because it's not exist already. I mean, it's not as if they didn't start yet.
But maybe we also decolonize our idea of cinema, because, for example, people in Africa, or like, for example, I think it was in Uganda or something, I read it, I saw a documentary about that, where people were just setting up with their video projector in their backyard. They set up the cinema, which was just a video projector and some space that they kind of occupied. I mean, for me, this is a cinema experience, to watch film together in a space together. And I think, you know, maybe we have to also think cinema differently, and not like in our European way that it's like a brick building where you go inside and you have the posters outside, and then you go into this climate space and you go out again afterwards, you know. Maybe we have to be learning from other cultures and really decolonize this idea as well.
Actually, just to add to that quickly, I remember listening to some of my friends in Indonesia, and a really interesting thing in Indonesia in the small, you know, the outside of, let's say, Yogyakarta and Jakarta, there's this really popular thing called USB stick cinema, which is I guess it's a version of that, which I think is really interesting. Where of course it's with the permission of the filmmakers, they have these protected USB sticks, and then they're just passed out in the community, and they watch it in open air sort of spaces across the community, across the country. And I always thought that was super interesting.
I think in terms of those small cinemas you were talking about that people set up in backyards, etc., I think there's tens of thousands of those throughout the continent of Africa. There still isn't an economy without piracy within that. So I think it's still very much showing football matches and movies that are pirated. And that's, I think, until we develop an economy around it in terms of showing films and filmmakers can actually earn from that, we're not at that point yet. But I think it is interesting to explore that network out there and how they can develop into places where our films can be released. So yeah, I think, you know, I was reading an article the other day and someone was saying that cinema could end up like the opera, you know, where it's like the special occasion, you go out and it's all the intelligentsia and everyone pats you on the back and says what a great film you've made, and then it disappears. So I don't fully believe it will become that, but I do think that festivals, local and regional festivals, could play a more important role, because festivals have followings, they have identities, they have databases, and they are trusted in curation in a very different kind of way. It's not always seen as purely commercial, and I think there is potential for festivals to extend their reach beyond a singular event in a cinema for 1 or 2 weeks.
Benjamin, do you think, and this is also can be for everyone, if you want to answer this as well, do you think, for example, the visibility of films coming from World Cinema Fund over the year, it's improved somehow? Do you think it's improved mainly because of the festivals or because of specific nationalities? I mean, and of course, it needs still, there is a lot of work, not only on the projects with World Cinema Fund, on all elements of this kind of films. So do you think it's improved for the festivals or other reasons?
I mean, I think generally there's a big interest. The more globalized our world becomes, I think there's more interest in seeing things from other parts of the world. And I think, for example, Rafiki is, I think, a brilliant example of LGBTQI plus story that is really has not been told like that, especially because it comes from a place like Kenya, you know. I mean, this is just so specific and so brilliant because it's very specific, but at the same time, I think young lesbian girls all over the world could relate to that film a lot, you know. So it's like, I think this kind of cinema that we are able to be very specific locally, but in the same time universal. I mean, that's what we're all looking for, obviously. However, I think there is more, and that's maybe the positive for me, to be a bit more optimistic, maybe to see that there is a future for this type of cinema, because we're getting more global, and I think people are becoming more interested in other parts of the world, and they hopefully looking beyond their own horizon a little bit more, because they see that there's people all over the world who share the same, you know, reality in certain aspects.
We cannot deal with the films as category. I mean, like, you know, Fiorella, I wanted to ask you about, okay, what will be the future for the visibility for Latin America? But also I'm thinking at the same time, like, for example, this year we're working on the 3 Jordanian films from Jordan. And maybe for the last 4 years, we didn't have any Jordanian film. There wasn't any feature fiction there was only documentaries. But is it about the nationality of the film? Is it about that to frame it, this is an art house or independent? I mean, the categories are changing in a way dramatically all the time. Do we deal with films? Of course, as Stephen said, in North America, it's now the African films. It's kind of super sexy for them, etc. But I'm talking more specifically about, how to position this for the audience. Is it really about, if I liked Jordanian films, it means I will always be loyal for the Jordanian films, and any art house films will come from Jordan that I have to watch? So it's a question for everyone how you think to deal with this as category, or it's by film by film?
I think it's film by film, of course. I think each film is different, and but we know, and during all these years, we learned to see how certain markets react to certain nationalities. I am from Latin America, and I was a distributor in Mexico. I have always loved Latino American cinema. I have produced cinema in Latin America, and I have to say that in Latin America, we don't release a lot of Latino films. The Latino Americans don't, the Mexicans don't release, Argentina. It's very, very, very small. We work each film as a specific film. We don't take it as a Latino title, let's make this, especially because I'm from Latin America, so I hate all those cliches. But at the same time, I understand that I see the reaction of certain regions more interested to Latin American films than others. And I think that's natural. Same with Arab films, same with French films. And specifically, even this distributor is very sensible for this nationality. And it's like that because we all have sensibilities and we think we know our market. So I think also it's not only about the market, it's also the people that are in charge of the companies.
Luigi, you're a producer based in Singapore and Toronto, and you worked as programmer in Singapore Film Festival as well. And even it's on the side. But what you enjoy, or you sleep better at night, as a producer or as programmer?
Neither. Both are.
Neither. You don't sleep in both.
Yeah, we don't sleep.
Because as a producer as well, you're not obviously, you don't have to be aware all the time about the visibility of the film or how it's going to do in a specific country. Do you feel that it's important to have a role for you? I mean, now by time that to have a role to make it more visible, to work more on specific countries with the sales agents or the distributors to reach to the right audience?
No, I think so. I think so for sure. So I think that what for example, Stephen and Benjamin have shared, I think those are very. I agree with them very much. The specificity of each market and this kind of difficulty in the perception in each territory in making that jump to accept certain types of cinema. So I mean, maybe not necessarily related to taste specifically, but for example, now I'm working on the distribution in Southeast Asia for a more, by all accounts, a more commercial sort of film. Vengeance Is Mine, All Others Pay Cash, which I'm one of the co-producers of. And it's also, I guess, a gangster-ish-esque sort of film. But again, there is this perception, it's an Indonesian film. And this is within the Southeast Asian region, which is, I guess, the general perception is, there's an openness and there's a willingness to experiment. But we've met with some sort of difficulties because of this sort of, I guess, related to audience design and perception, how to shape it, how to get distributors to take that risk and to watch the film for what it is and not to stop it at at an earlier stage.
I think it's really encouraging to hear what you were saying about put the nationality aside and try and find the audience and treat each film very specifically. I think the other factor that I think is very hard to put one's finger on, it's very intangible, is this thing called Zeitgeist, about like what can really resonate with an audience now, and why is it resonating with an audience now? And I mean, I've certainly seen that when we produced the film Rafiki, which was a few years ago, was in Cannes, and the film took, I won't give you a long story, but it took 7 years to develop and produce the film. And the film came out just after the beginning of the Me Too movement. And I think the film got a lot of attention because certainly the qualities of the film, but also the time it came out. And we used to say to ourselves, if we had been quicker in developing and financing the film, and it came out 2 or 3 years before the Me Too movement, we don't think it would have done as well as it did. And I think that is, it might sound cynical, but I think it's a real factor, is how to read, the kind of trends. And when you start writing a film, you don't know what's going to be happening in 5 years' time, and you can't pre-guess that, or you don't want to pander to trends too much, because you lose your authenticity, you lose your heart, you lose the spirit of the film. But there is this factor of a zeitgeist which can really change the trajectory of a film. And I think part of that, of kind of changing that trajectory, is with distributors and sales agents taking more risks. And I know it's easy to say because it's their money they're risking and their livelihoods, but I think it's often mavericks who find those special films who are not necessarily following an obvious trend. And those films can catch audiences in a more dynamic way.
My last question, actually, and also it's more, I need everyone feedback from you. For example, Fiorella, you mentioned about the World Cinema Fund distribution fund part, which is needed to get back again. But to think about it, the projects from World Cinema Fund regions needs maybe stronger platforms, needs real support to keep it developed, maybe working with the European institutions or something. Because when I think about it now, for example, also in our region, the Arab world, most of the Arab countries, there is no real support or governments putting cinema priority or putting it on their list at all. What do you think it can be, or it's needed for the regions World Cinema Fund focused on? What it needs more to do?
I do think that the key is in the distribution, that they need support to be released. And I do think that all this audience work should be done also more specifically, not only by film, but encouraging the distributors to think outside the box in each country. That I think that's something that they don't have now, that I don't see them doing it. And it will be great that there will be more workshops around the world that encourage the distributor to rethink what they are doing and how to work the films. There used to be a fund for World Cinema Fund distribution that was incredibly helpful. It doesn't exist anymore. And I have to say, as a sales agent, that these kind of funds encourage a lot the distributors, because they don't buy the film because it has a fund, but they buy a film that they love, and that these kind of funds encourage them to take the risk. And I think there are not a lot of funds for distribution around the world. It's hard, and it's something that helps a lot for the distributor to take the final decision.
Actually, when there was the Dubai International Festival and Abu Dhabi Film Festival, and they shut down both festivals. Anyhow, we had some discussions, and maybe there was a panel once, etc. Anyway, they were giving funds and cash awards for every single almost element of the film. except the distribution. And this is created at the end a fake market, because it was mainly about the audience of the festival and then nothing. And that's why when Dubai stopped, it affected the industry on the spot, because it was based on fake industry, on fake numbers, on fake markets. About the World Cinema Fund, I think, or the European institutions, I believe it's really about the bigger picture. First, psychologically, we need to keep regular discussion, because we need to feel that we're not in our bubble, and I'm not talking even about that bubble, about my bubble. To feel that there's other people, they're thinking in a way, they're struggling with the same way. We need to have this regular discussion just to understand how we can get not help. It's more about finding solutions, actually.
I believe more distribution funds also for the actual countries themselves. I think, like, not only giving, because when we speak about decolonization, we have to also say that, like, I mean, World Cinema Fund is still based in Berlin, Germany, and it's still most of the recipients of the money is the countries themselves. But the whole, as I said before, the whole culture of producing and making films is still quite a European model. I mean, all these funds, like also the French funds, and they're still applying a very, let's say, European model of how to make films and how to distribute films.
I mean, maybe just this is, if I was to look at it like in terms of like the big picture, what would a dream sort of thing for me would be like more discussions on an institutional sort of level. So let's say like the countries that I can only speak for like Southeast Asia, I guess, because I'm slightly more familiar, but like for the World Cinema Fund or bodies to have open sort of discussions with organizations within each of the countries. So for example, in Vietnam, so I thought, when Vincenzo was speaking with the Vietnamese film community in Vietnam last year, because of things that Taste was experiencing, I thought that was great. But if it was to the institution, like the cinema department there, or if there were discussions with the film organizations within, like, let's say Thailand or Singapore, and they could see the larger sort of merit of film, and like you said, like film literacy, and to see, because I think for them to make that jump or to make it a bigger sort of thing, they would need to see the benefit of supporting cinema in that country. But it would, I think, institutionally, it would be nice. So I mean, within Southeast Asia, for example, Singapore and the Philippines have started their own public funding.
Yeah, I think just to pick up on what everyone else was saying, I think there is this kind of bigger structural challenge, and that is that if you look at how the films we make are financed, it's mainly with subsidies and grants and government funds, etc. And then a very tiny percentage, if at all, gets spent on distribution support. So all this money is invested in these films, but to actually get them out into the world, there's a blockage on kind of getting access to more distribution. So just on that level, if you look at the millions and billions of dollars that have been, and euros that have been spent, how much is spent to actually get the film out? What kind of support is there? And I think there's a real imbalance in that. I think the other challenge is, to pick up on what Benjamin was saying, is that, there's almost like a disconnect with a lot of filmmakers whose films get feted in Europe and the rest of the world and get a lot of critical success, and they travel to festivals, but they have very little relationship with their audiences at home. And it's this kind of weird parallel universe one lives in. And I think that it can also impact on the kinds of films people start making, and what audiences, who are they making films for, and why are they making those films. So I think that's another major challenge, and why I think it's really important that there is like a percentage of the funding that goes towards local releases of films, because I think if you can help build audiences locally, it starts becoming more sustainable and more connected to where the film is from.
I mean, maybe this is not the only way of doing things, you know, maybe there's like other ways. And I think this is what we also spoke about with Vincenzo and Isona, about really trying to go in the countries themselves and learn from the industries there, and then learn from the people how they're doing things, and to truly become a global, let's say, you know, endeavor, so to say, and not always think that the way we do it in Europe is the only way and the right way. And to give more like visibility also to the other film industries, even though they might not be as financially strong, but I think there's lots of ideas and lots of interesting approaches that we should take on board. And I think if World Cinema Fund could be an institution that supports and starts and gives that, supports that kind of endeavor to really have these voices heard more, the better it is. Of course, it always helps to attach some money to it. But yeah, that's obviously a funding question. But yeah, I think it's really about having industries from other parts of the world than Europe having more visibility and more in the game, so to say, in the thinking of audiences and distribution.
Thank you to Benjamin and to the other guests, to the other panelists of this conversation. And then we start with the last moderation of this World Cinema Fund Day. I'm very happy to introduce to you, not for the first time, a very important guest. I'm not joking, because without Lutz Nietzsche of the Kulturstiftung des Bundes, so German Federal Foundation for Culture, definitely the World Cinema Fund wouldn't exist. So we started talking about the World Cinema Fund, about an idea, I would say, of the future of World Cinema Fund 20 years ago. That's so 2002. So I wouldn't say we were teenagers, maybe a little bit older, but 20 years later, we are here sitting together, and it's a big pleasure to talk about the World Cinema Fund and about the history of the World Cinema Fund. So I would say Lutz is definitely World Cinema Fund closest relative. Thank you very much, Lutz, for supporting us during these 20 years.
Thank you so much, Vincenzo. I'm very glad to be here. It's actually, it's not a cinema place, it's a theater we're in, the How, and it's amazing to sit here. It would be much more better to have an audience here, but still, we're very glad to know you out there at the screens. I'm very glad to welcome you on behalf of the German Culture Foundation. It's great to be back at the World Cinema Fund Day, and I think it's the first time that a topic is actually raised 2 years in a row. We've had audience development and archives and what have you, and now it's decolonizing cinema for the second time. And I'm very glad that this is taking place. And let me say right at the beginning, thank you to the great team of the World Cinema Fund, to Vincenzo and to Miriam and to Isona. And let's say thank you to all the producers and filmmakers and distributors and writers and all the artists that are part of this very large and intense story of the World Cinema Fund. It's been 20 years now, almost 20 years.
We started 2004, officially, but so obviously there were 2 years. We started talking about this 3 years before.
It took a while to convince, let's say, the funding bodies that this would be maybe one of the greatest ideas of how to spend public money. And it's now 200 years, oh no, 200 films later.
260, I think.
260. And Vincenzo, I would like to know from you, would you, from your point of view now, almost 20 years later, would you consider the World Cinema Fund as a success story, or have we failed?
Maybe somebody could believe that if you ask this question, I would automatically say, yes, definitely, we are successful, because you are the funder, and we are the institution who get the money, and yeah, why not? We shouldn't say, definitely, we are so successful. But to be honest, yes, I could confirm we are successful, because indeed, I would say 95% of the films funded by the World Cinema Fund are successful. I'm not talking only about film festivals. I'm not talking about sales, theatrical release. I would say I would prefer to talk about the artistical and cultural political meaning of these films. Okay. I'm convinced that these films are meaningful, and well, let's do more. Let's support more World Cinema Fund films. Just an example, for example, 2021, we are talking about a COVID year. There were 16 world premiere of World Cinema Fund funded films at the different international film festivals.
Okay.
Although, all this film has been produced during the COVID time. And it worked very well. So this film got many awards. And yes, I confirm, I would say the World Cinema Fund is successful.
Congratulations to that. Still, you still feel that there is something that should be developed, and you call that World Cinema Fund histories. And I can see that there is obviously the production support, there is the support of distribution in Germany. But what's on your mind when you say that supporting World Cinema Fund histories is something that's of importance?
I think there are so many ideas, so many possibilities to further develop the profile and the activities of the World Cinema Fund. But definitely, so we are working on the present and on the future of the film, on the future cultures. But to be honest, I'm also convinced that we should also support the visibility and the rebirth of the past of the film culture in these countries or regions, because without past we don't have future. And there are so many hidden masterpieces in many countries that cannot be restored because there is not the money for this. Sometimes we receive interesting projects interesting films submitted by producer who don't have the money to restore this film. And I think if we talk about rebuilding or trying to rebuild the film culture in all these regions and countries, we should also speak about the past of this film. So a future project could be the so-called World Cinema Fund history, trying to support trying to rebuild the past culture, the past film culture in these countries and regions. Maybe one day we're going to start again.
From the German Federal Foundation's point of view, it's actually something, the contemporary aspect of the World Cinema Fund is especially interesting. There is this major development of decolonizing culture all over German institutions, be it the museum or be it theaters. And what I find fascinating about the World Cinema Fund is that it works as a kind of missing link. There is a certain tendency to historize institutions' histories, and what's happening, dealing with, for example, the history of the colonial past. And what happens with the World Cinema Fund is that it actually offers stories from contemporary life. So it goes very well together. I'm not saying that World Cinema Fund histories, it's actually another missing link maybe to deal with this kind of film language that is maybe hidden in archives, and it needs curators and filmmakers maybe to delve into the archives and to rescue and to present what's in there. But let me move on to another point, which is the title of the World Cinema Fund. We know we feel very uneasy with things like world music, and we think it's a misrepresentation of cultural diversity. But when we started this project, we named it World Cinema Fund. So wouldn't it be time to reconsider the name and maybe drop the word for some time and rename it like Who Cinema Fund or Wild Cinema Fund or whatsoever Cinema Fund? What's your take on that?
I think this is definitely a crucial and very interesting question, because I think when we started using this name, I would say we were completely innocent about this name. So it was probably at the time, at the beginning of this century, the right decision to do it. And we didn't consider some probably very important cultural political issues and elements. The fact is that if we support film projects in some regions of the world, like the region of the World Cinema Fund, meaning Africa, Latin America, many Asian countries, we are talking about a kind of division and fragmentation of the film industry, because we have the European cinema, maybe the American cinema, maybe the rich Asian cinema, and then we had the world cinema of countries and region. So I think maybe there is a kind of misunderstanding, because as an observer, particularly in the world cinema of the regions and country, you could understand, okay, there are the guys in Europe, and then there are the guys and girls in the other countries. I think there is a soft smell of Eurocentric and colonized attitude. I think that decolonizing cinema should also mean decolonizing ourselves and thinking about all these things which maybe sounds as normal, but they are not normal at all. So let's try to definitely change the Eurocentric point of view. Let's try to decolonize ourselves, and let's try to be a real work in progress, considering very important questions. Maybe one day we should start talking and thinking about this, for us, important title.
Okay. There was the phrase of the bubble in the last film that we saw, and obviously, we are in this, what you've just mentioned, the Eurocentric hallucination chamber. But what really is a question that we are asking ourselves is there also a festival bubble? Is it okay that, or how do world cinema films actually reach out into the audience that they, or into the regions that they come from? How do you foster a situation where it's not just part of the festival circuit and then it's over, but where actually, let's say, a grassroots distribution circles can work with World Cinema Fund films? Does digitalization, for example, help you in order to reach a different audience in the places where these productions come from?
I think, well, this is the reason because we decided to organize this panel about decontextualizing or contextualizing audiences and finding new way of distribution strategies to show the films. But I think also in this case, it's about looking for a democratization of this particular landscape. I think it was extremely important when Steven Markowitz, who is a producer, a very good producer from South Africa, starting saying, you know, everybody talks about streaming services and watching films, I don't know where, internet and platform, but this is very important in this context to say that in order to watch a film thanks to a streaming platform, you need a very good internet connection. And for example, he said, so in Africa, it's not always the case. Right. So I think it's about finding a balance between technological democratization in this case, and also about finding a balance between new ways to watch films, and about the idea of confirming, of supporting the idea of cinema as a place. Because cinema is a film product, but it's also a place.
Right, okay. So that may be a different and a further funding line apart from production, distribution, histories to actually support the cinematic place, the architectural surroundings where you make certain social experiences, be it a film or be it a coffee or be it coming together as a community.
Yes, particularly during the post-COVID time, I think we definitely need it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and then Lutz, now we are going to introduce, you know the videos already. We are going to introduce two important World Cinema funded projects today. And it's definitely about decolonization, because we can talk about decolonization and talk about decolonizing structures, or for example, we can talk about the way to shoot a film. We can talk about the film industry. I would like to to talk about a very important example made by a Brazilian director last year, when he started to explain that if you take two pictures, a photo of the Brazilian government and the photo of a Brazilian film crew, you will say that there are many elements in common. So meaning that everybody is white.
Okay.
So if we talk about the colonizing film industry, for example, in particular countries, we can also talk about decolonizing film teams, which is in many countries very important. But obviously, decolonizing cinema and decolonizing film history means also talking about content. And today we are going to introduce to you two film projects. So the World Cinema Fund is about not film, but about film which don't exist yet. And one of these films is an Argentinian film called Puan. Puan is a university in Buenos Aires, the Faculty of Philosophy. And it's about philosophical development, which I think could be very important if we talk about decolonizing philosophy and cinema in a colonized country, which was Argentina. I would suggest let's watch the video first. The video is with the two directors of the feature film, Benjamin Neistat and Maria Alge. Benjamin was already in the competition of the Berlinale 4 or 5 years, and even more with a great film, Historia del Miedo. Probably you can remember it. And it was done. He still have a very successful career. It was with another wonderful World Cinema Fund funded film in San Sebastian, Rojo, and his partner in life and work, in this case, Maria Alge, has been supported by the World Cinema Fund for the distribution of a film in Germany. The film is La Familia Submergida. But, well, let's start watching this video. Thank you. So with this conversation, we are going to deal with different paradoxes and challenges about ambiguities and identities, about decolonizing strategies, decolonizing cinema, decolonizing ourselves. I think there is a big link between these three blocks: decolonizing strategies, cinema, and ourselves. Maybe this is probably the biggest challenge, the biggest problem. And obviously about a great project and the future film, Puan. Puan is a university in Buenos Aires. It's also a location of Buenos Aires. And I think it's also a small village not so far away from Buenos Aires, but this is not important for our discussion today. So my first question, considering so that you work together, so yeah, both directors, but very different if you consider your previous work. So I would like to understand a little bit more about this working together. So it's a kind of technical human question. So in order to start our conversation. Go ahead.
We start. Thank you for your presentation. We are very happy to be here with you. And to answer the first question, it was not planned, oh, let's go and do a film together as something mental that we decide. It was something that was created out of conversations and trips and started to appear in a very smooth way. One day we have this idea of a professor and we started to talk about this, but we never had really the time to focus and write the proper script. And then we keep on having conversation. As soon as something happened, we said, oh, this could be for this project, for Marcelo. We started to think about this film for a particular actor.
Yes, I will also say that the fact that, as you said, we have very different track records, considering what we've done so far. I think that makes it more exciting, you know, to not know really what we're going to get as a result out of working together. It's a bit more mysterious than when you do something that is completely yours, because after maybe 1, 2, 3 films, you kind of begin, becoming predictable to yourself. But if you work with somebody who has a completely different sensibility, then the outcome is much more of a mystery.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's start talking about decolonization, particularly talking about decolonization from the Argentinian point of view. Considering that particularly Argentina is the Latin American country which considers itself like the most European country of the continent. So decolonizing Argentina is a very complex matter.
Well, Argentina, as you well said, has a history of an identity contradiction ever since it was founded. It was supposedly founded against the Spanish crown, but then there was a lot of confusion because instantly there was a lot of British and French influence because of commerce. And then there was different waves of immigration from Europe, and at some point the imaginarium of Argentina wanted to believing that it was another sort of European country, which it was never really. But this is more of a political problem or tension, if you want. But when it comes to decolonization, it's a big deal for Argentina, because maybe it's more tricky and harder than for other nations across the continent, which have a more clear outset in terms of identity. I think with our project we are entering a hazardous zone, so to say. But we are eager to do it.
Yeah, indeed, because it sounds like a paradox, but if you talk about the colonization, you are a part of the problem. You are white, you are European, and we speak about the colonization. It's very contradictory, it's a paradox. And indeed, as you said, Argentina probably is a more complex problem than other Latin American countries. But if we talk about decolonized cinema, I don't want to talk about the past decades, about the cinema of the 70s, a very political cinema with Brazilian or Argentinian directors, who have been very important for the history of cinema of the continent. I would like to talk about Lucrezia Martel and Zama. Would you say that Zama is a crucial film if we talk about films dealing with the history of colonization?
I think the film deals with an existential problem of a human being, and the context is the colonization period. What I think is that it's important for our country to have films about the past, recreating it at inventing the past, because we are used to watch films about the past of other cultures and other countries, and we don't have most films about our history and our past. And for me, when I watched Sama finally finished, the most impressive thing was to being in front of some things that I only saw before in books, or some ideas, and was wow. And I think for the imaginario of the country, it's important to have this sort of experience, cinematic experience.
Yes, when you talk about decolonizing cinema, what comes to my mind today, 2022, is not so much about content or story-wise related period or whatever, but more about the formal choices that you do. Because I think what we're witnessing in Latin America, but everywhere around the world, is that we are facing what the filmmaker Peter Watkins defines as a monoform culture, in which, the change of paradigm and the platform culture are sort of pushing the filmmaking community into a very narrow language landscape, and I think the true freedom to be found today, the true decolonization, is about creating your own voice, your own form, which is something that Zama certainly does, because it's not only a film about the past, but also a formal venture. But when you say decolonizing cinema, that's the first thing that comes to my mind now.
I think this is a very important matter, so talking about form. And now I would like to ask you my last question, because I think it makes sense in this context. So the idea was to talk about the future of the project, but the idea was also to ask, would you say that editing is a kind of philosophical process? And I think in this case, if we say the form is a decolonizing process, we could also say that editing is a decolonizing form. If you try to develop your own idea of form and your own idea of cinema, which shouldn't be more related to the general idea of cinema of other countries or other film culture. So I think, thank you very much for starting to talk about this. So what do you think about editing and philosophy?
Of course, because philosophy has to do with thinking about space and time. And of course, editing is all about creating space and time. So that was Benjamin talking about the form and how each culture perceives this idea of space-time, and to create your own form about how you perceive and how you can tell something in terms of how you perceive time and how you perceive emotions. Editing is exactly the place where you create this feeling that has to do with your hair, with how it beats a movie, how you can tell your idea of time. And I like a lot how Raúl Ruiz put it in his book Poetic del Cine, how he talk about each culture having its own way to approach to a war, not only this idea of the central conflict, one in front of one, and how each culture needs to discover the way to approach to a narrative form, and editing has to do with this.
Do you share the same opinion, Benjamin? I suppose yes.
His own opinion.
I do. No, I totally agree. I was listening and discovering these ideas myself. I do think editing is, where form actually unfolds. But I also see editing, connected to mise en scène as a whole. So I think the whole process of filmmaking, writing as well, is or should be philosophical in such way that it reflects a certain idea of this experience of being in the world, to say it philosophically.
Okay, so I tell you the truth, I'm in love with this project and with this film. Reading the script was such a great experience. It was fun. I had a great time. Also, consider the fact that Puan is a comedy. Indeed, is a comedy. Will be a comedy. But as you said in the introduction to the project, written in a very serious way. And so, what about comedies and philosophy?
Well, I think that it was very natural for us to develop a comedy, since we didn't start writing until we, as Maria said before, we were really in the harsh, hardcore confinement of the pandemic. You know, we were in that state of mind. And I guess, you know, when as people say, you know, better laugh, not to cry, you know. And we had the certainty, and we have the certainty and the faith that people, through laughter, through a comedic sense, can find the deepest tensions and questions of existence. And you know, philosophy and comedy are not unknown to each other since the Greeks, which would present jokes to the audiences as way to invite to thought and to reflection. And we certainly hope that Puan is going to be this kind of experience, but also because there is a common sense that, you know, when somebody tells you philosophy, you immediately, in your imagination, you think of something heavy, academic, you know, piles of books, something you'll never understand. You don't have the baggage to be up to it. And we certainly want to create a philosophic mood that is open and accessible and actually very funny to be faced to.
Thank you very much for accepting to talk about a future film, because I know for directors and writers can be a challenge. For us as a funding institution, it's about being curators for films which don't exist yet. So we should try to figure out the future film, and obviously this is very helpful. I think the particularity of Marcelo's developing philosophical trip is that somehow the characters, but the film offers a kind of solution, because this trip, this development, this philosophical personal development is a decolonizing process. So I would say we could say decolonizing process as a chance for the continent, for the culture, for the different people of Latin America, particularly if we talk about people originally coming from other continents.
I mean, it's a moment in history right now where, you know, there's a lot of tension, political tension in the region. You know, there have been years of right or extreme right political currents that are still streaming all around. But then again, you have new awakenings, as you have in Chile, which is now rewriting its constitution from scratch, and the person leading that new conventional constitution is a Mapuche ethnic women. And you know, so it's a time of awakening in many grounds and in many layers of whatever the Latin American identity is and can be. And it somehow feels right to address, you know, even comedically, the fact that our academia has been sort of looking elsewhere, and it can be part of the solution, or if there is a solution, you know, to say it simplistically. Of
at least a solution for the moment, or for a collaboration in between academia on how we can look to our political process and in a more active way.
Yeah, creating, you know, the ontological grounds for new things to happen, for new ways to see this. You know, we have a beautiful region full of natural resources. Everything's here to flourish, to create a great level of life for everybody. We just have to sort of rethink our way to relate with the world in many, many different ways, economically, productively, but also philosophically, for starters, maybe.
I think it's a complex process for a complex identity. Also, if we talk about Latin American philosophy, culture, vision of the world, what does it mean? So you have started answering this question or this consideration. So it's, I'm just wondering, you have in mind more the pre-colonial words, meaning once many centuries ago, or more the critical philosophical thinking, but more or less contemporary Latin Americans, because obviously there are many Latin American philosophers, but they're dealing more with probably as the guys in the script with European philosophers. So what is Latin American philosophy, or what is Latin American culture, vision of the world? What would Marcelo teach in the university in the future?
I think that at the beginning of the 20th century appear at the same time that appeared this idea of the white mythological idea of the country that was created with the migration and all this mythological idea that we are a white country appear in South America in the 20s. A lot of thinkers of in Mexico, in Peru, and also in Argentina that start creating like a real thinking about, as we were saying before, about this space and this time, and trying to translate the ontological problem of the philosophy to our continental, and to start to talk about the problem, the problem of how this population was, particularly about racism.
Yes, there is, for instance, one thinker from Peru called Mariátegui, José Carlos Mariátegui, which in the very early 20th century created mostly a point of view, a perspective from which to see the world, not only Latin America, because, you know, if there is a Latin American philosophy, it's not bound to only have a glance at the region, in the same way that German philosophy applies to the cosmos. We must aim at as a way of thinking in the region that could be applied and go through, you know, the universe. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a philosophy. And Mariátegui, in a way, did this, but creating his perspective out of the particularities of his region and his people. And I think there is a lot to discover from those early thinkers, and then to follow through the conundrums of the you know, of the complicated history, recent history of Latin America, which is so often, you know, a interrupted history because of all that we know in the political history of the region.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think it was a very nice and interesting conversations. So thank you very much again. It's me again. It was the presentation of the project Puan. Puan is a fiction film. It will be a comedy, so it's very funny, and a funny comedy about philosophical decolonizing development for the Latin American culture, made by two extremely interesting directors. And now we are going to see another video. It's a conversation with the two directors of the future film, a future documentary, Testament. And Testament is definitely about decolonizing history, and it's about decolonizing film, because it's about the past of the country, Kenya. It's about of the British colonial time. It's about also the crimes of the British occupants. And I think it's a very intensive moment of historical discovering. And personally, was very touched when I read the project and the treatment. We're going to see the director Tsipi Kimundo from Kenya. She's from Kenya and she lives in Kenya. The other director, Mena Nani, also from Kenya, but living in the United States. And then there is also another character, Vanjugu Kimati. She's the, if you can say that, considering that we're talking about a documentary, so the most important character of the film. Unfortunately, the connection with Vanjugu was very bad, so we are going to see her only for a couple of seconds, but she will play extremely important role during the shooting of the film. So, Testament with Tsipi Kimundu and Mena Naji. Thank you. We can start. Well, this film is definitely about decolonizing cinema. And I would say I'm convinced that decolonizing cinema means also, and particularly, decolonizing history. So without decolonizing history, there is not a decolonization of cinema. So what do you think about this, both Mina and Tsipis? It's a good starting point.
I'll jump in. No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I was thinking just about this yesterday, that the power of the visual image and the power of the narrative cannot be overstated in how it shapes our thinking. And I think at the very beginning of the colonial project, cinema, images, text were all involved in creating in the West or in the colonizing countries the images and stories they wanted to tell about the countries they were colonizing. And so I absolutely agree. I think the two are inseparable.
Very good choice.
And if we are to move forward in decolonizing cinema, as you say, we have to look at that. We have to look at those constructions and kind of undo that veneer that they give us and look at the scaffolding behind it and try and take it apart and then rebuild it in a whole new way. I think with our film, I don't know that we're undoing the scaffolding, actually. I think a lot of other people involved in this are using a different, or experimenting with a different visual language and visual grammar to do this work as well. I think we're kind of employing a traditional and Western form of filmmaking, the traditional narrative documentary, to tell a story that hopefully also exposes the behind the scenes, but we're using a traditional language to do it.
So, I mean, I totally agree with what Mina was saying, just the idea of like how, like what our film is doing and like how are we approaching just the idea of decolonization, and like just looking specifically at Kenya and how Kenyans, like even today is still being colonized in terms of like information. You know, we still have a British education. We still see the same movies from the point of view of the West, you know, those fiction films, whatever. And for us, Mina and I, like when we started making the film, people started telling us, how about you put some people, you're like, no, like they've had their voice, you know, kind of spoken, but we want now the people who are actually fighting, the people who have never been able to speak, to finally speak out. Because like in Kenya specifically, we were not allowed to speak about it for years. It's only, I think in the 90s when the third president of Kenya came and said, fine, we lift the ban against the Mau Mau. So for a long time, we've been just hearing the voice of others. Yeah, so our film basically like puts in the limelight, you know, the people who've never been heard, you know, and that's what we want to amplify.
We do know that cinema cannot really change the world, or almost not totally. But this film is indeed about decolonizing history, and at the same time is about trying to reach some goals, because you have a concept, you have a program. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you are trying to reach with this film?
I think that one of the main purposes, or one of the main motivations for making our film was to bring up the issues around how history is told, and particularly how the history of Kenya is told, until now, it's still ongoing. This vision of Kenya as this very, beautiful country with lots of wild animals, and, people go on safari and drink gin and tonics in their, campsites. And the British are kind of seen as, they civilized the country, they opened it up, and they made it safe for white people to come. And what is not known is that the British had concentration camps in Kenya only a few years after the camps were discovered in Germany. And this is not known, it's not known the absolute violence that was employed to govern Kenya, and to not tame animals, but to tame other humans, and the absolute it wasn't just about physical violence, it was also the violence of breaking up families, of breaking up the culture, of devaluing anything indigenous to Kenya. So I think our film really would like to start that conversation, and expose these things that, as Zippy was saying, they could not be talked about within Kenya itself. Talking about the independence movement, talking about the Mau Mau was banned until 2004. And so a culture of silence was built around that decree that wasn't really dismantled until 2004, when the president at that time said, okay, the Mau Mau is now unbanned, and even since 2004, there is international conversation really about this. So we hope our film will contribute to opening up that conversation, and making it hopefully more safe for people to feel safe to talk about these things, and to give the Kenyan perspective on their own history, rather than still living with this oppressive, British perspective of what and who Kenya is and was.
For me and my generation, I grew up in Kenya, I went to school in Kenya, but a lot of these things we've been finding out as we kind of was researching about the film. People in my peers still believe things that I'm just like, I cannot believe. So I feel like this film will be able to literally put the truth out there, and everyone will be able to know their real history, because we don't know our real history. And a lot of people, not only Kenyans, but people, I think, just to understand where we are coming from, I think it's so important to be able to understand why things are like that. Why is the country so divided? Because the British came, they divided us, they put us against each other so that they could win, and they won. And every time there's elections and everything, people fight against each other, but this is still very rooted in colonialism.
And now I would like to take a little bit about visuals or film structure. So Mina, you started talking about this at the beginning of our conversations. So because we as World Cinema Fund, we have definitely, I do hope, we have a strong cultural political identity, but also a clear artistic profile. So we do believe in cinema, and we are very interested in topics, but we support films. So I would like to know a little bit more about your cinematic visions and about the visual and artistic profile of the film.
It has led to taking this as I said before, this traditional form of documentary, because I think one of the reasons for me anyway was that we want it to be accessible to the widest number of people. And that was very important for me anyway. And so within that, how do you subvert the sort of colonizing gaze of film, right, of a documentary, and use those tools to undo that gaze. So I think we're in the process of that now, of kind of really thinking that through. I think one important thing for me again is just that this is a Kenyan point of view. You know, we get the British point of view. We've had it all these decades. We don't feel we need a quote unquote, you know, British representative in the film. It comes through anyway with the history, with the archival footage, in newsreels, in text. So that's what we're actually doing, is showing or giving the British a voice through their newsreels and how they constructed them, through their colonial policy texts. So I think the idea is to sort of balance the personal story of Wanjugu, you know, as she embarks on this very personal mission, which becomes a much broader mission, with historical context, and then trying to make it cinematic.
But like, yeah, no, totally. Like what Mina says, when we started, we had this dream. We're like, oh my gosh, we're gonna do this very, you know, like Mina comes from very arty background. I came with the idea of like, I was, you know, kind of researching to do a fiction film about, you know, about the history. And so we both came at a point we were both like really thinking very differently. But I guess the story called us and it led us to a different direction, which we had to follow. And at the beginning, I know, like, you know, we met, like, I think the first person we met was actually Wanjogo's mother, Mokami. And that's me and Mina that day. We knew that we were going to make this film. We stopped, we cried, we kept filming. Wanjogo was asking the questions. Like, and I think for me, like, you know, this was a day that we knew that how important this film was going to be and how we're going to tell it. How we're going to tell it was another story, because we thought, oh, we would just go around, we would interview people. And then, like they said, no, we needed someone to anchor us, someone relevant today, someone carrying on the work that was being done by the freedom fighters. Who was Wanjogo? Wanjogo was continuing the work that her father, her mother were doing, not in the battlefield, but in the public, in her own space, causing the same troubles that, you know, the other fighters were causing. She's in so much trouble right now. She is being crucified. She's being insulted. She's still in the big fight.
Thank you very much. I love film history, definitely, yes. And I'm very interested in film archives. So I'm happy to hear to discover me. I know it already because it was a part of the treatment, but obviously working with archives and with archive footage is very interesting. And the question obviously is how to deal with this. I think is a big challenge because it's an important step in order to rebuilding history. And it's an important step in order to understand the different point of views and the subjectivity and objectivity of history from the both parts.
I think now the you know, dealing with the archival is a real challenge. I mean, you know, ideally we're trying not to use it in an illustrative way where somebody says something and then you see the archive. I think we're much more interested in I mean, a couple of things. One is with the British newsreel footage that has this very dramatic voiceover. Let's say there's you know, they'll shoot somebody and you actually see them fall, or the white officer will be questioning a black man or roughing him up somehow. And if you see it without the voiceover, you see what is actually happening. When you see it with the voiceover, it's like, we've caught this dangerous terrorist and he must be, you know, dealt with severely so that civilization can rule Kenya. And so just decoupling the voice from the image has been quite an education. And, you know, we don't really have to do much more to show what was really going on. I mean, you see it. So that, you know, I guess we're trying to subvert the propaganda so that you actually subvert the archival footage so that you see what's actually going on rather than how it was manipulated for British propaganda purposes.
Thank you very much, Mina. I have only another question, and then everybody is free to have probably a real breakfast like you, Mina, and maybe Zippy, a real dinner, considering the time. And well, it's about the future of the film. So decolonizing cinema means also decolonizing distribution and visibility. I do believe in it. What do we have in mind in order to support the visibility of the film? Not only considering film festival and market, but also, for example, if you talk about the visibility of the film in Africa, because I hope it shouldn't be only a film for the audiences of the Western festivals.
I mean, I'll just say something. I think for us, like one of the really, really big things that we want to do with the film is like impact. We want it to be screened, you know, in as many places as possible in the grassroots, just because the first thing we said, we want to make people understand history, like make people understand, you know, where we're coming from. And I think one of the things that we always considered was not giving up our rights in terms of being able to distribute it to, you know, for impact, especially. And, you know, and just looking at the subject of the film, the topic of the films, the discussions, I think we are already getting quite a bit of interest in terms of impact. We haven't even finished the film, but like there's a lot of things that we want to do. We want to like use the film to like shift things, and I think like impact is one of the biggest things that we plan to do, apart from, of course, the festivals and everything.
I mean, I think there's a few audiences. I mean, one is for the freedom fighters and their children, and the people, you know, themselves who the film is about, ostensibly, to see themselves and their concerns reflected on screen, right? When do they ever? I mean, and we hope that we do a good service in this, in that they can see their stories reflected on screen as they should be, you know, and not sort of demeaned or demoralized or devalued in any way. We want to see uplift. So that's one thing. The other thing is, yes, absolutely. We are working. We will be working with hopefully a wide group of grassroots organizations all across the continent, so that we can get it out, you know, and have it seen by, you know, festival goers, but also just communities, different communities everywhere. As much as possible. We like that to be as broad as possible in Africa and across the continent, which is huge. And then also, but we also want, we also are thinking of, you know, doing screenings in the UK and other colonizing countries, not to just film festival audiences, but to schools, community groups, you know, kind of grassroots groups there as well, because they don't know this history either. You know, they've been fed the same propaganda. So they grow up thinking, oh, we were the good guys.
So thank you very much to the directors of the project Testament from Kenya. And Isona, this is the end of the World Cinema Fund Day 2022.
And we did it again, the second year in a row, doing on streaming, and we managed. And it couldn't have been possible because, okay, we are multitasking, but this couldn't have been possible with the enormous help of the team of Gerens, Batterman, Gembeha. Amazing technicians, great people that make this show possible for all of you, so you can keep on watching it
and,
once and one again.
If I may, I would like also to say thank you to our multitasking colleague Miriam Henze. She's amazing because she's in charge of many things for this big show of the World Cinema Fund. And well, maybe you didn't have the opportunity of watching the film, our World Cinema Fund Day live, but obviously you're going to find everything on YouTube during the next month.
Forever and ever, you can always come back to the videos, check them again, spring from, if you are interested in decolonizing distribution strategy, or if you want to learn more about Puan, or when the film Puan started in cinemas in a couple of years, then you can come back to the conversation with the directors. So the material is now staying in the internet for all of you, and maybe we can learn the significance of this in a couple of years.
Last but not least, and this is definitely important because this is the core of our activity, we have a deadline for the submission of the project to the World Cinema Fund, if I remember well.
Yeah, you remember very well. So now we are staying here on stage, talking to all of you, but on the 28th we have submission deadline for projects, because don't forget that the World Cinema Fund curated projects that haven't, or films that haven't been shot there, and this is our key activity during the year.
Okay, then I would say thank you very much, Isona.
Thanks.
And then I would like to finish with a slogan of the World Cinema Fund saying it's not only about money, let's talk about cinema and decolonize ourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.